The Galactic Hunter's Lodge smelled like recycled air and overconfidence. Captain Vex-Thorn of the Kashari Imperium leaned back in his hover seat. His forearms spread wide in a gesture that screamed, "Look at me. I'm important." His scales glittered under the bar's amber lighting, each one polished to an almost offensive shine. Around him, a crowd of lesser hunters had gathered, their cups raised, their eyes wide with the kind of admiration that only free drinks could buy. And then, Vex-Thorn announced, his voice booming across the establishment. The Crover charged at me with all 6 of its heads screaming. 6 heads. Can you imagine? The crowd murmured appreciatively. Someone in the back called out, "What did you do?" Vex-Thorn's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. "I waited. Patience, my friends, is the mark of a true hunter. I waited until it was 3 meters away, then 2, then 1.5, and at precisely the right moment I activated my neural disruptor and watched all 6 of those ugly heads drop like overripe fruit." Laughter erupted from the assembled hunters. Drinks were refilled. Vex-Thorn basked in the attention like a solar collector soaking up radiation. "Tell us about the Vrexian Ice Stalker," someone else shouted. Yes. Now that was a hunt worthy of song." Vex-Thorn gestured grandly with his upper right arm. "The Vrexian homeworld, as you know, maintains an average temperature of -170 degrees. The ice stalkers there are apex predators, evolved over millions of years to be breath-killing machines. Transparent skin, silent movement, claws that can slice through combat armor like it's tissue paper." He paused for dramatic effect, taking a long sip from his crystallized methane cocktail. "I tracked one for 6 days across the frozen wastes. 6 days. My equipment was failing, my supplies were running low, and the creature knew I was following it. It was playing with me, you see, testing me. But on the 7th day I cornered it in an ice canyon. Just me and the beast, no backup, no escape routes, pure skill against pure instinct." "How did you survive?" a young Tentheri hunter asked, her voice trembling with excitement. Vex-Thorn's chest swelled. "I didn't just survive, little one. I triumphed. I studied its movement patterns, calculated its attack vectors, and when it lunged I was already rolling beneath its strike. One shot from my plasma rifle, right through its primary nervous cluster. The great ice stalker of Rexia added to my collection." More cheers. More drinks. Vex-Thorn was riding high on admiration and expensive alcohol, a combination that had ended poorly for many hunters before him, though he was too caught up in his own glory to notice the warning signs. "But surely," came a new voice from the edge of the crowd, "surely the most dangerous hunt would be for a Deathworlder species?" The crowd parted slightly, revealing the speaker. She was humanoid in appearance, though that meant little in a galaxy of convergent evolution. Her skin was a warm brown, her hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her eyes held a sharpness that suggested she was paying far more attention than her casual posture implied. Vex-Thorn's scales rippled with pleasure. Finally, someone was asking the right question. "Oh, I was hoping someone would bring that up." He gestured for the newcomer to come closer. "Please join us." "Your name?" "Lieutenant Kira Okonkwo," she said, moving through the crowd with easy grace. "Earth Expeditionary Forces currently on shore leave." "Earth?" Vex-Thorn's mandibles clicked excitedly. "A Deathworld, if I recall correctly." "Class 9 on the hazard scale, Class 12, actually," Kira corrected, accepting a drink from the bartender. "They updated the classification last year." A ripple of impressed murmurs ran through the crowd. Class 12 Deathworlds were the stuff of legends and horror stories, places where everything was actively trying to kill you and frequently succeeded. "Even better," Vex-Thorn declared. "Then you will appreciate this tale. 3 cycles ago I traveled to Grimhold 5, another Deathworld, though only Class 8. The dominant species there, the Razorbacks, are magnificent specimens, 2 meters tall, covered in chitinous armor, with reflexes fast enough to snatch projectiles out of the air. They hunt in packs, communicate through pheromones, and have never in their entire evolutionary history been successfully domesticated or reasoned with." "Sounds dangerous," Kira said, her tone neutral. "Dangerous?" Vex-Thorn laughed. "My dear Lieutenant, dangerous doesn't begin to cover it. I lost 2 members of my hunting party on the first day. The Razorbacks are cunning, you see. They set traps, they use tactics, they understand ambush theory better than most military strategists I've met." "You hunted them anyway?" someone in the crowd asked. "Of course. That's what separates the true hunters from the pretenders." Vex-Thorn's forearms spread wide again. "I spent weeks studying their patterns. I learned to mask my scent, to move silently through their territory, to think like they think. And when I finally found the pack leader, an absolute monster of a creature with scars covering half its body, I engaged it in single combat." "Single combat?" The young Tenthari hunter sounded horrified. Against a Deathworld apex predator? Yes. It was glorious. We circled each other for what felt like hours. It would feint left. I would counter. I would advance. It would retreat. A dance of death. As beautiful as it was terrifying. And then, in one perfect moment, I saw my opening. The creature's armor had a weak point, just beneath its primary jaw. One shot, perfectly placed. It fell at my feet, and I claimed my trophy. The crowd erupted in applause. Drinks were raised. Several hunters were already pulling out their communicators, no doubt eager to share this tale with friends across the sector. Kira took a sip of her drink, her expression thoughtful. Impressive. You've hunted quite a variety of dangerous species. Indeed I have. Across 17 systems on 12 different deathworlds against some of the most lethal predators the galaxy has to offer. Vex-Thorn's chest was so puffed out by now that he looked like he might float away. I've faced creatures that could tear through starship hulls, beasts that could generate electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable ships, predators that existed in dimensions we can barely perceive. I have hunted them all, and emerged victorious every single time. Every single time? Kira asked, one eyebrow raised. That's quite a record. When you're the best, perfection is merely the baseline, Vex-Thorn declared, clearly enjoying himself immensely. I've dedicated my life to the hunt. I've studied tracking, stalking, weapon systems, xenobiology, tactical analysis, survival techniques, everything necessary to stand at the top of the food chain regardless of which world I find myself on. Fascinating, Kira said, setting her drink down on the bar. I have a question though. Ask away, Lieutenant. I'm always happy to share knowledge with those interested in the art of the hunt. Kira's eyes locked onto his, and for just a moment Vex-Thorn felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Something primal, something that made his scales want to flatten against his body in an instinctive defense posture. You've bragged extensively about hunting Deathworlders, Kira said, her voice suddenly very quiet, very calm. About stalking them, killing them, taking them as trophies. But I'm curious about something you haven't mentioned. The bar had gone quiet. Every hunter was leaning in, waiting to hear what question this human Deathworlder would ask the great Vex-Thorn. Kira smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Did any of them hunt you back? The silence that followed was absolute. Vex-Thorn's mandibles froze mid-click. His scales began to ripple in a pattern that every Kashari in the room recognized as profound discomfort. That is. Well, of course they. He stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him entirely. Because, you see, Kira continued, still in that terrifyingly calm voice, everything you've described sounds like hunting, tracking prey, studying their patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Very one-sided, very safe, in a way. You had all the advantages, superior technology, preparation time, the element of surprise. You were the hunter, they were the prey. She took a step closer to him. But Deathworld predators, the truly dangerous ones, we don't just hunt, we fight back, we adapt, we learn, we turn the tables. So I'll ask again, and I'd appreciate an honest answer this time. When you were hunting these supposedly dangerous Deathworld species, did any of them ever figure out what you were doing and start hunting you instead? Vex-Thorn's third arm twitched involuntarily. In the back of his mind, memories were surfacing. Memories he'd carefully edited out of his glorious tales. The razor backpack that had tracked him back to his camp. The ice stalker that had actually been herding him toward a trap. The crovar that hadn't been charging at him but running from something else. Something worse that had then turned its attention to him. Lieutenant, he said, trying to regain his composure. I think you misunderstand the nature of hunting. Do I? Kira tilted her head slightly. Please, explain it to me. Explain how you can claim to have hunted apex predators from Deathworlds without ever having experienced what it's like to be hunted in return. Explain how you can stand here boasting about trophies and perfect records when any predator worth fearing would have taught you the meaning of terror. One of the other hunters, a grizzled Vorthan with cybernetic enhancements, spoke up. She has a point, Vex-Thorn. I've done Deathworld hunts myself. The ones that really stick with you, the ones that earn respect, those are the hunts where you weren't sure you'd make it out alive, where the prey became the hunter. Vex-Thorn's scales were now cycling through colors so rapidly that it was making several nearby patrons nauseous. I have faced danger. Real danger. Have you? Kira asked. Or have you faced challenges you knew you could overcome? There's a difference between bravery and calculated risk, between hunting and surviving being hunted. She finished her drink and set the glass down with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any of Vex-Thorn's previous declarations. Here's what I think, Captain Vex-Thorn of the Kashari Imperium. I think you're a skilled hunter. I think you've killed some dangerous animals. But I also think you've never truly been prey. You've never felt what it's like to be stalked by something smarter than you, faster than you, more adapted to the environment than you could ever hope to be. You've never experienced the specific kind of fear that comes from realizing the predator you were tracking has been tracking you for twice as long. The bar was so quiet now that the environmental system seemed deafening. And that, Kira concluded, is the difference between a hunter and someone who's survived a death world. One kills for sport and glory. The other kills because if they don't, they die. One has trophies. The other has scars and nightmares and a very healthy respect for things that can fight back. Vex-Thorn wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain that he was being unfair, that his hunts had been dangerous, that he'd earned his reputation through skill and courage. But looking into those human eyes, he suddenly understood why Earth was classified as Class 12. It wasn't the gravity, or the weather, or the diseases. It was the fact that everything there, from the smallest microbe to the dominant species, had evolved with one simple rule: adapt or die. And humans had adapted very, very well. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Vex-Thorn's forearms hung limply at his sides, his carefully constructed persona crumbling under Kira's unflinching gaze. Several hunters in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding their drinks incredibly fascinating. Finally, a nervous laugh broke the tension. It came from a Skelix merchant who'd been enjoying the show from a corner booth. Well, this got awkward fast, didn't it? Kira turned away from Vex-Thorn, her posture relaxing slightly. I didn't mean to ruin the party. Just figured someone should ask the obvious question. No, the grizzled Vorthakan hunter said, standing up. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Kira. You're absolutely right. I've been hunting for 40 years. And the worst injury I ever got came from a pack of thornbacks on Savage Prime. I thought I was tracking them. Turns out they'd been herding me into a kill zone for 3 days. Lost my original eye and half my torso to that mistake. Learned more in those 10 minutes of fighting for my life than in a decade of successful hunts. Vex-Thorn's scales had settled into a dull gray, the color of shame among his people. I have been in danger, he said quietly, his booming voice reduced to something almost pitiful. The Razorbacks did track me. For 2 days I barely slept, constantly moving, knowing they were out there in the darkness. I've never been so terrified in my life. But you survived, Kira said, not unkindly. And you learned, I hope. I learned that fear is a more effective teacher than any tactical manual, Vex-Thorn admitted. I learned that the moment you think you're in control is usually the moment before everything goes wrong. And I learned that there's a vast difference between hunting an animal and surviving an encounter with something that sees you as food. Now that, Kira said, pulling up a chair, is a story worth telling. Not the sanitized version where you're the unstoppable hero. The real version. The one where you were scared and made mistakes and barely made it out. Vex-Thorn looked at her for a long moment, then at the crowd of hunters watching him. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered himself back into his hover seat. His scales began to shift toward blue, a color that signified contemplation and honesty among the Kashari. You want the truth? He asked. Fine. The truth is that the Razorback hunt nearly killed me. Not because they were stronger or faster, but because they were smarter than I'd anticipated. They didn't just react to my presence. They planned around it. The crowd leaned in again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Less celebration, more genuine interest. I'd set up camp in what I thought was a defensible position, Vex-Thorn continued. High ground, clear sight lines, proximity to water. All the things the manuals tell you to look for. What I didn't realize was that I'd picked the exact spot they wanted me to pick. They'd been leaving false trails all day, guiding me toward this location. Why? The young Tenthari hunter asked. What was special about that spot? It was downwind from their actual nest, Vex-Thorn explained. They could smell me, hear me, monitor me, constantly, but I had no idea they were there. That first night they sent juveniles to test my defenses. Small ones, not really dangerous. I killed 2 of them easily, thought I was doing well. I was actually teaching them my response patterns. Kira nodded approvingly. Standard pack tactics. Send expendable members to gather intelligence, then use that intelligence to plan the real attack. Exactly. The second night they came in force. 8 adults, coordinated assault from multiple angles. They'd figured out my weapon's recharge rate, my reaction time, my blind spots. If I hadn't gotten lucky with a rock slide that blocked one of their approach vectors, I'd be decorating someone's den right now. How did you escape? Someone asked. Vex-Thorn's mandibles clicked in bitter amusement. I didn't escape. I negotiated. That caused a stir. Several hunters exchanged confused glances. Negotiated? Kira's eyebrows rose. With the species you claimed was impossible to reason with, that was my first lesson in humility. Vex-Thorn said. They're not impossible to reason with. They're impossible to reason with when you're trying to kill them. Big difference. When I dropped my weapons and showed submission, their pack leader actually stopped the attack, watched me for about 10 minutes while I stood there, unarmed and vulnerable. Then it growled something that my translator picked up as roughly "leave now, don't return." So I did. But you claimed you killed their pack leader, the Vorthaking pointed out. Single combat. Weak point beneath the jaw, trophy for your collection. Vex-Thorn's scales flushed with shame again. I lied. I killed a juvenile months later on a different continent, claimed it was the pack leader, and fabricated the rest. The real pack leader. Last I heard, it's still alive and running the same territory, probably telling its offspring stories about the stupid Kashari, who wandered into their land and barely escaped with his life. The bar erupted in murmurs. Some hunters looked disappointed. Others looked thoughtful. A few were nodding slowly as if they recognized their own exaggerations in Vex-Thorn's confession. Kira raised her glass to him. That took courage to admit. Real courage, not the fake kind you get from telling tall tales in bars. You shamed me into it, Vex-Thorn said, but there was no anger in his voice. Though I suppose I needed the shaming. I'd started believing my own stories. Happens to the best of us, the Vorthayan said. I once told a whole crowd that I'd wrestled a gravity worm with my bare hands. Truth was I'd shot it from orbit while it was sleeping. But the lie made me sound better. So I kept telling it until I almost believed it myself. Other hunters began speaking up, confessing their own embellishments and outright fabrications. The young Tentheri admitted she'd never actually hunted anything more dangerous than escaped livestock. A crystalline being in the back revealed that his collection of rare predator specimens was mostly purchased from black market dealers. One by one, the carefully constructed legends crumbled. Kira listened to it all with an expression that was equal parts amusement and sympathy. Finally, she held up her hand for quiet. All right, since we're being honest, I should probably mention that I'm not actually on shore leave. Vex-Thorn's head snapped toward her. What? I'm here on assignment, Kira explained. Earth Defense Forces, Special Operations Division. We've been tracking an illegal hunting operation that's been targeting sentient species under the guise of Deathworld predator collection. 3 ambassadors have gone missing in the past year, all of them last seen near establishments like this one. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. My job, Kira continued calmly, was to infiltrate the hunting community, identify potential suspects, and gather evidence. And you, Captain Vex-Thorn, just made yourself my primary suspect by bragging about hunting species that include at least 2 known sentient civilizations. Vex-Thorn's forearms shot up in a gesture of surrender so fast he nearly fell out of his chair. I swear on my ancestors, I've never hunted sentience. The Razorbacks are animals. Intelligent animals, yes, but not sentient in the legal sense. None of my hunts involved protected species. Prove it, Kira said, her voice hard. I have records. Documentation. Every hunt was licensed and legal. I may be a braggart and a liar about the details, but I'm not a slaver or murderer. Vex-Thorn was frantically pulling up files on his wrist display, projecting permits and certificates into the air. Kira studied them for a long moment while every hunter in the bar held their breath. Then she smiled that unsettling smile again. You're clean. I already knew that, actually. Checked your records before I even walked in here. Then why? Vex-Thorn's scales were cycling through so many colors he looked like a malfunctioning display screen. Because I needed to see how you'd react when challenged, Kira explained. The actual suspects we're looking for don't crack under pressure. They double down, get aggressive, try to intimidate or bribe their way out. You just panicked and tried to prove your innocence. That's the response of someone who's afraid of consequences because they understand right from wrong. She stood up, stretching like someone who'd just finished a pleasant workout rather than systematically destroying a man's ego and then terrifying him. Plus, I genuinely wanted to know if you'd ever been hunted back. Call it professional curiosity. We Deathworlders tend to be interested in how others perceive danger. You're terrifying, the young Tenthari said, her voice filled with something between fear and admiration. Thank you, Kira replied cheerfully. We practice. Now before I leave you all to your drinking and hopefully more honest storytelling, I do have one actual story to share. Since everyone else has been confessing, it seems only fair. She leaned against the bar and her expression shifted. The playfulness faded, replaced by something darker and more genuine. 3 years ago, I was part of a survey team on an uncharted world we designated as Prospect 17. Beautiful place. Earth-like gravity, oxygen-rich atmosphere, abundant water. We were excited because it looked like a potential colony site, ran all our scans, did our assessments. Everything checked out. No large predators, no dangerous diseases, no hostile environment. We set up base camp and started detailed surveys. The bar was silent again, but this time everyone was listening because they wanted to, not because they were shocked. What we didn't know, Kira continued, was that the planet had a species of ambush predator that lived entirely underground. They were patient, incredibly patient. They watched us for 6 weeks, learning our patterns, our schedules, our behaviors, and then one night, they struck. How many did you lose? The Vorthax quietly. Half the team, 12 people, gone in the first 10 minutes. Kira's voice was steady, but her eyes showed the pain of the memory. The creatures were like nothing we'd ever seen. They could sense vibrations through the ground, coordinated their attacks with chemical signals we couldn't detect, and they were fast. Faster than anything that size had a right to be. How did you survive? Vex-Thorn asked. We stopped thinking like surveyors and started thinking like prey, Kira said. We abandoned all our equipment, everything that made noise or vibration. We moved only during the windstorms when the ground was already shaking. We covered ourselves in mud to mask our scent. We spent 4 days traveling 15 kilometers to reach the backup shuttle. And the creatures? The young Tenthari asked. They hunted us the entire way. We'd see burrows opening ahead of us, closing behind us. They were herding us just like the Razorbacks herded Captain Vex-Thorn, except they were herding us toward what we eventually realized was a breeding ground. They weren't trying to eat us. They were trying to feed us to their young. Several hunters made disgusted sounds. We figured that out about half a kilometer from the shuttle, Kira continued. Saw the bones, lots of bones from various species, realized this world wasn't uncharted at all. Previous survey teams had just never made it back to report, so we changed direction, started moving parallel to the shuttle instead of toward it. The creatures got confused, broke their herding pattern. That's when we ran. Did you make it? Someone asked, then immediately felt stupid because obviously she had. Kira smiled grimly. Barely. Lost 2 more people in the final sprint. The creatures were fast in short bursts, but not built for sustained chases. We reached the shuttle, got airborne and watched from orbit as dozens of them emerged from the ground, tracking our movement across the sky. What happened to the planet? Vex-Thorn asked. Classified as a Class 15 Deathworld and quarantined. No colony, no further surveys. Renamed the species Subterranean Coordinated Hunters, though the crew called them something far less scientific. And every single member of that survey team, myself included, has nightmares about the sound of dirt moving in the darkness. She picked up her drink, found it empty, and set it back down. That's what being hunted actually feels like, she said. Not the sanitized version. The real thing. The absolute certainty that something wants to kill you, knows how to kill you, and is actively working on doing exactly that. It's not glorious. It's not exciting. It's pure survival instinct screaming at you every second of every minute. The bar was completely silent now, so when I hear hunters bragging about their trophies and their perfect records, Kira said, looking around at the assembled crowd, I wonder if they've ever actually experienced what they claim to hunt. Because if they had, they'd know that survival isn't something you brag about. It's something you're grateful for. Vex-Thorn stood up slowly. His scales had settled into a deep purple, the color of respect and acknowledgement. Lieutenant Okonkwo, I apologize for my arrogance, for my lies, and for disrespecting the very real dangers that you and others have faced. Apology accepted, Kira said. And for what it's worth, you're not a bad hunter, Captain. You're just a hunter who hasn't been prey yet. If you ever want to truly test yourself, Earth offers guided expeditions into our reserve territories. Fair warning though, our wildlife doesn't play nice, our environment actively tries to kill you, and our insects carry diseases that can drop a Kashari in under an hour. That sounds absolutely terrifying, Vex-Thorn said. It is. When can I sign up? Kira laughed, a genuine sound that broke the tension like a hammer through glass. Now that's the spirit. Give me your contact information. I'll forward you the application forms. But I'm warning you now. There's a 60% washout rate in the first week, and that's just the training course. I'll take those odds, Vex-Thorn said, his confidence returning, but tempered now with something that looked like actual wisdom. I think it's time I learned the difference between hunting and surviving. Just one question first, Kira said. Why do you really want to hunt? Not the glory, not the trophies. The real reason. Vex-Thorn was quiet for a long moment, his scales shifting through several colors as he thought. Because I need to know if I'm actually brave or just lucky. Because I've been lying to myself for so long that I've forgotten who I really am. And because if I'm going to call myself a hunter, I should at least have the honesty to face something that scares me. Good answer, Kira said. Maybe you'll survive after all. She pulled out a small data chip and handed it to him. Applications are on there. Fair warning, you'll need to pass a physical, a psychological evaluation, and a basic survival course before they'll even let you near the dangerous stuff. Earth doesn't mess around with tourist safety. Understood, Vex-Thorn said, accepting the chip like it was a sacred relic. Kira nodded to the assembled hunters, paid for her drink and headed toward the door. Just before she left, she turned back. One more thing. To everyone here tonight. There's no shame in fear. There's no shame in admitting you were in over your head. The only shame is in lying about it, 'cause those lies get people killed. People who hear your stories and think they can do the same without understanding the real risks. So tell your stories. Tell them honestly. The failures teach more than the successes ever will. And with that, she walked out into the station corridor, leaving behind a bar full of hunters who were suddenly re-evaluating every story they'd ever told. Vex-Thorn sat back down, staring at the data chip in his primary hand. Around him, the other hunters were talking quietly among themselves, their earlier bravado replaced with something more thoughtful. The young Tenthari approached his table hesitantly. "Captain? Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Vex-Thorn said. "When the Razorbacks were hunting you, what was going through your mind?" Vex-Thorn considered the question carefully. "Regret, mostly. Regret that I'd underestimated them. Regret that my arrogance had put me in that position. And a very clear, very simple thought that repeated over and over. I don't want to die here." "But you didn't die," she pointed out. "No. But I could have. And that possibility, that real chance of death, it changes you. Makes you reassess what's important. Makes you realize that all the glory in the galaxy isn't worth dying for if you're dying for the wrong reasons." The young hunter nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I understand." "Good," Vex-Thorn said. "Then you're already smarter than I was at your age. Remember that feeling. Remember that hunting isn't about proving how tough you are. It's about respecting the creatures you hunt and the environment they live in. The moment you forget that is the moment you become prey." The Vorthian hunter raised his glass. "To honest stories and hard lessons. To survival," Vex-Thorn added, raising his own glass. "To learning the difference between hunting and being hunted," the young Tenthari said. All across the bar, glasses were raised. The celebration had transformed into something more meaningful. A recognition that they'd all been fooling themselves to varying degrees, and that maybe, just maybe, it was time to be more honest about the realities of their profession. Outside, Kira walked through the station corridors with a small smile on her face. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from her commanding officer. "Report, Lieutenant. Did you identify the suspect?" "Negative, sir. Target wasn't at this location, but I did accomplish something else." "Explain." "I reminded a bunch of hunters that the galaxy is full of things scarier than they are. Might cut down on the number of idiots who get themselves killed trying to prove how brave they are." There was a pause. Then a chuckle came through the communicator. "Not your assigned mission, but I'll take it. Return to base for reassignment." "Acknowledged. On my way." As she walked toward the docking bay where her ship waited, Kira thought about the fear she'd seen in Vex-Thorn's eyes when she'd challenged him. That moment of genuine terror when he'd realized someone was calling him out on his lies. Good, she thought. Fear keeps you alive. Fear makes you careful. Fear teaches respect. And in a galaxy full of deathworlds and the creatures that called them home, respect was the one thing that separated the survivors from the statistics. Behind her, in the Galactic Hunter's Lodge, the conversations continued late into the night. Stories were retold, this time with more honesty. Mistakes were acknowledged. Lessons were shared. And Captain Vex-Thorn sat at the center of it all, holding a data chip that represented a chance to discover who he really was beneath all the lies and bravado. He had bragged about hunting Deathworlders. She had asked if any of them had hunted him back. Now he was going to find out what that really meant.